This video will demonstrate the process of installing the Cisco XRv on the ESXi 5.1 system. So let me just get started with a quick introduction on the XRv, which is nothing but a virtual machine based platform running the 32-bit Cisco IOS XR software with the QNX microkernel. This virtual machine contains a single route processor with the control plane functionality and line card network interfaces with their associated functionality. The one good thing about this is it is hardware independent. So since the XRv router runs on a virtual machine, it can be supported on any x86 hardware that is supported by the virtualization platform. The great thing is it gives you flexibility. So you can move the XRv router from a server in one physical location to a server in another physical location without moving any hardware resources. This virtual router also supports a wide range of IPv4 and IPv6 services and routing protocols, such as the IPv4 multicast. It does support CDP, ICMP, or the range of the layer 3 routing protocols like OSPF, BGP, ISIS, MPLS, traffic engineering, and it also supports network management. So it supports features like the enhanced CLI, XML, and also SNMP. The great thing about this is it comes in 3 different flavors. The first one is the demo image, which is a portable downloadable virtual machine, which is it is limited in its usefulness, which is up to 2 megabits per second, but it can be used for a number of internal and external use cases, including the iOS XR training. It could be used as a sales tool for familiarization to the XR software and also as a tool for early field trial for control plane features. It is available free for users, and it is just you have to keep in mind that it is rate limited up to 2 megabits per second. The next flavor is the simulation image, which provides a large-scale, high-fidelity control plane network simulation. The supported hypervisor is the ESXi 5.0 or later, or the Quick Emulation 1.0. For this particular image, it is rate limited to 50 megabits per second. The last flavor for this thing is the production image. It provides a platform for the Cisco IOS XR based virtual route reflector. This particular package has no rate limit. The one thing you have to note is to run the production image, you need the VMware ESXi 5.0 or later, and that's the only supported hypervisor if you want to run the production image. There are 2 types of demo images available. If you go on to cisco.com and you download it, there will be 2 ways to download two different flavors. One is the OVA and one is the VMDK. OVA is an OVF file which is packaged together with all of its supporting files, it includes all the metadata that describes the configuration of the VM, including the CPU, the memory, the network, and reference to virtual disks. So everything is already specified in that template for you. You don't need to know all those details. However, if you go ahead and use the VMDK file, you will have to be aware of certain ways in which you need to configure your CPU, your memory, and your operating system. So what I'm going to do in this video is going to show you both ways of getting your XRv up and running, and then you can choose however you want to deploy it in your network. So let's see it in action. What I have for you is the location of cisco.com in which you can see these demo images that you can quickly download and use. Uh, as I said, there are two ways, that there's an OVA file or there is a VMDK. For every feature XR release, there is a separate file, so you can decide on which release of software do you want to run on your XRV router. What I've done is I have downloaded both the OVA file as well as the VMDK file locally on my computer, and then I have also uploaded it to my data store. So what I have currently for you, the UCS, I have a UCS server which is a UCS B200M3, and on that server I have deployed the ESXi 510. So I'm going to use this server and I'm going to deploy the VM on this particular server. You can the demo version, as I said, is which is the version that is provided without any Cisco support, is suitable for use. You can use it on you can run it on a laptop, or you can run it on a server, which could be either the UCS server or a third-party vendor that supports the VMware ESXi 5.0. So you need to just be aware of that. It just needs, you could use the UCS server, or you go ahead and use any third-party vendor. So I've got the ESXi up and running, and I'm going to show you how to deploy the virtual machine on this one. So let's start with the first method, which is using the OVA. So in order to do that, you need to go to File and Deploy OVF Template. Here you deploy the location of your file. So I have downloaded it locally onto my computer, and I'm going to use that OVA file. So as you can see, if you go onto the browse, I've got all of the different versions downloaded here. So I'm going to select one of them, which is the 512, and I'm going to use that. I'm going to show you how to get XR 512 up and running quickly. So click Next. As you can see here, everything it knows it's the Cisco IOS XRv, version is 512. Go ahead and click Next. This is where you kind of give a name to your XRV. This is the name of the virtual machine. So go ahead and give something that you would use in your system. So I can give it XRVA. Now this is where you specify the configuration that you want for this particular virtual machine. If you go ahead and use small, this virtual machine will have 1 CPU, 3 GB of RAM, and 2 NICs. You have the option of using the medium configuration, which will give you 2 CPUs, 4 GB of RAM, and 8 NICs. And the last one is the large, which you need to use ESXi 5.1 plus, so you can't run this on the ESXi 5.0. So this profile will basically give you 4 CPUs, 6 GB of RAM, and 10 NICs. You need to make sure you're running ESXi 5.1 or later for this. It's always recommended to run this on an ESXi 5.1 or later image. There is also a huge version here which you can use, which gives you 8 CPUs, 8 RAMs, and 10 NICs. So what I'm going to go ahead and use small. It's going to give me 2 NICs and it's going to use 3 GB of RAM. This is where you select the resource pool where you want to deploy this template. I'm going to select the resource pool that I have created before. Now here you select what kind of disks you want to use, whether you want to use thick provisioning or thin provisioning. I'm going to use thick provisioning for this one. And this is where it maps the particular network used in this template to the network in your inventory. By default, it just maps everything to one of your destination networks. You can go ahead and change that before you power on the machine. The one thing to note is if you say that it has to have 2 NICs, the first NIC will always be associated will always be the management interface. So you're going to use that as a management network interface to connect to your internal local management, and then the rest of the NICs will be assigned for your testing. So this is where you click Finish. It's going to go ahead and deploy this VM for you. Now, one thing you have to note is while this is going on is there are a few more steps that are required for you to do before you go ahead and power on this virtual machine and get going. First, the most important thing is to add a serial port. That is what you will use to connect to that particular instance of your virtual machine. You can currently the supported serial, you can go for a minimum of 1 serial port, which is going to be your XR console, or you could go to a maximum of 4 serial ports. One would be the console, one would be the aux port, and there will be 2 debugging ports that you can use. I'm going to show you the process of adding 1 serial port to your VM. So this is my new virtual machine that I have just created using the template. I'm going to go ahead and do edit virtual machine. Now this is where you're going to, if you want to change certain things, you can change. So as I said, the first adapter is always going to be the management interface, and that is correctly mapped to my management network. The other adapter, I'm going to map it to a particular VLAN in my network, within my network. So go ahead and change that and say OK. I think it's currently still working on the first bit, so just give it some time until it comes back, and then you'll see a message here saying that it's finished configuring the machine, and then I'll be able to modify it. I think it should be done. Let's see. Okay, now let me see whether it has changed the configuration. Yeah. So what the next bit that you need to do is to add a series. What I've done is I've changed the network to connect to user VLAN 100 for my second adapter. Now I'm going to go ahead and add a serial port. Now this is again is needed before you go ahead and power on the VM. So you click next here, change this to connect via the network. Then click next. This is where you're going to say that it's going to be a server, and here you're going to specify the port that you're going to use. So what you need to do is to specify, write telnet and specify the IP address of your server. So I'm going to specify the IP address that I use to connect to my ESXi host, and then you give it a particular port number. Now this is very important. You need to make sure that you specify a telnet, or else the port will be TCP backed instead of being telnet backed, and you might see some incorrect behavior. So make sure you specify telnet over here and specify the correct IP address of your ESXi host, and then you do finish. So while this is going on, and while you go ahead and add the other the other port, the serial port, the other thing you need to do is you need to modify the firewall setting of the ESX host to allow connections to serial ports. So in order to do that, go to your host, go to the configuration tab, and then over here you need to go to security profile, and then you need to go to firewall and go to properties. In this, you will see there is a section over here which is saying VM serial port connected over the network. This needs to be checked. This was I have checked it here. You need to check this box so that it modifies your firewall settings on the ESX host to allow connections to serial port, and then click OK. Once that is done, you're ready to power this VM on. So I think the port number which we used, just check, yeah, so just check the serial port number. It is 6008. Okay, so let's go ahead and power on this virtual machine. So it's currently, if you look over here, it's currently powered it on. Now we need to see where we can connect to it. So we go into that IP address of the host and the port number that we specified, 6008, and connect to it. It's going to power it up, and as you can see here, it's coming up, it's loading the image, it's booting it, and it's 512. That's the software version that we have had selected before. So it's going ahead and booting that particular version for you. One thing you have to note is the amount, we have used the small configuration profile, so it's going to, I think, come up with two interfaces. One will be the management and the other one will be a gigi interface, which will be in the VLAN 100 network as we have specified. So you can see it's much more quicker than booting when actually the physical device boots up. So just give it a few more seconds and it's going to be up and running. It is it's an ideal platform for you to basically just use it as a training tool for the iOS XR iOS XR software, and it's really good to kind of show it to your customers and to get anyone familiarized with the XR software. They can test it and even for certain small features, control plane specific features, you can get many of these instances up and going on a UCS server and connect them and basically play around with the topology and play around with a lot of different features and test them. So it's quite cool, and it's very easy for you to set it all up, and it's quite quick to boot up. So while this is going on, the other bit that I wanted to show you was the second way of doing it was using the VMDK. Okay, so this is almost, it's coming up, and so the first thing it will ask you is to specify the root username. By default, Cisco root username is already available for you, but you need to specify any other username that you want to use. So I've specified a particular username and password here, and it will use that. But you could there is always a Cisco username and Cisco password available for you to use. That's already pre-configured. So while this is just booting up, the other thing I wanted to show you was the VMDK. The one thing that you will have to do is you will have to browse to your data store of your ESXi host. So if you go into the host and go to storage and then click on the data store, you need to make sure that your VMDK file is available in this data store for you, so that you can use that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload the VMDK file onto this data store. So I'm going to, for the VMDK, I'm going to show you the 511. So that's the VMDK file I have on my server. I'm going to just copy it over to my data store. So you can see here your console is available. As you can see, I told you the Cisco was available for you to log in. So the other thing that I've created is the username CPOC, but by default you can use Cisco to log in. So this XRv instance is up and running. You can see when I was deploying this template, I used only the small configuration. So that had two interfaces. The first one would be the management, and the other one would be the gigi interface that you can use for your testing. If you do show platform, you can see that it has one RP only. There's plan for support to have two RP instances in this XRv. That is in the roadmap. If you do show install active, you can see it's running 512, and show version is also a command you can use to see what version of software is it running. So it's currently running 512. So for all practical purposes, this is an XR device ready for you to get going. The other method that I was showing you was using the VMDK. So we can see now the VMDK file is copied. So I'm going to now deploy another XRv instance using the VMDK instead of using the template. So in order to do that, you go to your virtual machine and do create a new virtual machine. Then in this one, you need to select custom because you're going to specify various parameters of that particular virtual machine. So here I'm going to write XRVB, that's the second one I'm going to use. Go to next and select the destination storage where this virtual machine files will be stored. So since I've just got the data stored, I'm going to use that disk to store the virtual machine files. The next one is the virtual machine version. In this one you specify it to be 8. Next one is the guest operating system. In this you select other and then go ahead and select the 32-bit over here. Now this is where you specify the number of CPUs that you need to assign to this particular virtual machine. The minimum CPU you need is 1 and you can go up to a maximum of 8 CPUs. So I'm going to go ahead and use 2 CPUs for this test. This is where you specify your memory. The minimum memory you need for this is 3 gig. So what I'm going to do is use the minimum that is required, which is 3 gig. And this is where you specify the NICs that you want. So as I said, the last one that I showed you, I used the small configuration file which had 2 NICs, one for management and one was a gigi interface. With this one, I'm going to use 4 gigs. So I can specify the network that I want them to be in. So I'm going to use the first one in the management and the other 3 in a particular VLAN. And the adapter, this is where you have to make sure you change it to E1000 for all of the NICs that you're going to use. And then go next. Leave this SCSI controller to be the default. This is where you specify the virtual disk. So as I said, you already have the VMDK file that you've uploaded onto your data store. So you're going to use that existing virtual disk. Go to next, go to browse and specify that VMDK file that you've already copied onto your data store. Leave this to be default. And then you specify to edit the virtual machine setting before you complete it. Now you've already changed all of this and you've put them in the right VLAN. The last bit that is left that you need to do is to add the serial port. So let's go ahead and do that. Once you add the serial port, you say connect via network, and then you again specify the server address. Again, make sure you specify telnet, that's important, 1050. And give this another port number. So I'm going to give 6012 for this one and do finish. So it's going ahead and it's in progress. It's creating the virtual machine. It has completed doing that. So let's go ahead and power this one on. So you can see it's powering on. Now let's go and connect to it. So that was 6012. So let's go ahead and connect to it. See, 511. That's the version that we had selected for the VMDK file. So it's coming up now with 511. That's the first one that we have had up and going, which was running 512. If you look at the show version, you will see exactly the different packages that it has running. So you can see that it's got the routing package, it's got it's got multicast, it's got the multicast package too. It's got the manageability PI. So most of the PIs that you would need for doing a quick test is there already in your it's got support for BNG, multicast, manageability, MPLS, everything. So this is now coming up. You can go to your host and the virtual machine tab and you will be able to see the provision space for these virtual machines. So A and B, XRV A and XRV B is what we have currently, I have shown you. It's up and running and you can see the host CPU, the host memory, as well as the space that it has used on your server. So it's booted and it's up. Again, it's going to ask you to specify a root username. It's up and running now. I'm going to use the username password that I just created. Now, the one thing that I wanted to show you was the interfaces. Let it finish loading and then the interfaces will come up. Yeah. So if you remember, when I was configuring this virtual machine, I specified that I wanted 4 NICs. So the first one was connected to the management, and there are other 3 gigabit interfaces for you to be used. So you can very well, when you configure your virtual machine, you can specify exactly the number of NICs you will be using for your testing, and accordingly the VM will come up. You can later on go ahead and modify these settings and increase or decrease the number of NICs that you want to use for that particular VM. And so so this one comes up with 511 as we had specified while we were creating the VM. So yeah, both of these are up and running. So I've shown you both the methods of going ahead and deploying the XRv. The last bit that I wanted to show you was just wanted to remind you that you can go ahead and subscribe to this Cisco CPOC YouTube channel, and stay tuned for more interesting videos and on different Cisco technologies. Thank you.